So President Trump's 100-day peace plan for Ukraine has possibly been leaked, though its authenticity has been disputed by multiple entities, including those in the Ukrainian government. But just in case this is the actual plan, let's take a look at what's inside of it. So starting in late January, early February, there will be phone calls between Vladimir Putin and President Trump to initiate discussions. The objective here is to outline steps towards ending the war. Now, it's worth noting that it seems, according to this, that President Trump will be talking to Putin first to discuss what needs to be done. Then later in February of 2025, the Ukrainian government will be brought in to discuss these proposed peace steps. There will be supposedly a decision point, whether peace talks should continue or be paused if no common ground is found. And my personal opinion, there is just not going to be common ground found. Nonetheless, if talks proceed in March, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky must rescind his order banning negotiations with Putin, and then trilateral peace talks between Trump, Zelensky, and Putin will take place, and they will approve of the basic peace parameters during these discussions. On 20 April, which that date is very specific for a reason, there will be an Easter truce. It's a truce that will take place along the front line in Ukraine, and it is expected to force Ukraine to withdraw troops from Russia's Kursk region. Now on May 9th, which is actually Victory Day in Russia, a formal peace treaty will be signed, and it will end hostilities in exchange for all prisoners of war between the countries. There will be NATO and EU considerations with dates to be determined, but they are implied in the post-war that Ukraine will not join NATO, which requires a NATO summit approval and US approval. And then Ukraine will be allowed and expected to join the EU, the European Union, by 2030. And along with this, the European Union will provide financial support for post-war reconstruction. There is no word on if they've agreed to this either. Now, it's worth noting that Andriy Yermak, the head of the Office for the President of Ukraine, has categorically dismissed the leaked plan as quote-unquote fake. He stated that no 100-day peace plan, as reported by the media, exists in reality. These are just fakes that are often legitimized by the Russians. Now, Russian officials have not directly commented on the specific leaked 100-day peace plan. However, in response to President Donald Trump's broader initiatives to end the war, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has expressed skepticism. Now, when you analyze the contents of this plan, you can get some insights into how much the plan might align with or diverge from the strategic objectives of Russia and Ukraine. Now, when it comes to Russia's objectives, it does meet the objective of preventing Ukraine from joining NATO. It stipulates that Ukraine commits to not join NATO, which is a primary concern for Russia, as they use NATO expansionism as a threat to security, but as I've said many times, that is a Trojan horse for them just to try to take over Ukraine. It also gives Russia Ukrainian territory. There will be territorial concessions by requiring Ukraine to withdraw troops from Russia's Kursk region and implicitly accepting the current front lines. The plan will be interpreted as legitimizing Russian territorial gains, and it aligns with Russia's aim to consolidate control over occupied areas. They essentially get a win out of taking over more territory. Now, additionally, while this wasn't specifically stated, it is implicitly understood that there likely is going to be some sort of sanctions relief on Russia. Not sure exactly what that looks like, but if Russia were to come to an agreement with Trump, I'm pretty sure Trump is going to push to lessen the sanctions on Russia, which many of those sanctions require congressional approval, so we'll see how that goes. Now, as for Ukraine, there are some goals that are achieved. Obviously, the cessation of hostilities, which means that they would stop having their soldiers die, and aid and economic rebuilding could commence. A prisoner exchange. The proposal includes the exchange of all prisoners of war, which addresses a humanitarian concern for Ukraine, which oddly is not a concern for Russia. They just seem to not care about their prisoners of war. And then a big one is the prospect of EU membership, which, as I said, the potential for Ukraine to join the European Union by 2030 with commitment from the European Union to fund a post-war reconstruction which aligns with Ukraine's long-term political and economic aspirations. Now, obviously, the major drawbacks here are Ukraine loses territory, and it basically gives Russia a reward for what they've done. And there are no explicit security guarantees. It does not detail any kind of robust protections for Ukraine. So this could just be happening again in a few years after Russia rebuilds. And implementing such a plan without broad support both domestically in Ukraine and within Europe could undermine its legitimacy and lead to internal unrest and even continued resistance efforts among the Ukrainian population. In summary, while this 100-day peace plan addresses certain objectives of both Russia and Ukraine, it also presents significant challenges and heavily leans to favor Russia, especially when it comes to Ukraine's territory and security assurances. Any viable peace agreement would need to be more balanced, I think, and these factors are just not acceptable to the Ukrainians. And honestly, I'd be very surprised if Russia acquiesces to Ukraine joining the European Union, because a big chunk of the problem Russia has is Ukraine moving more towards the Western sphere of influence, which the European Union is a part of.